Hi guys, NERC Professor here. March 19th, 2026. FERC signs one final action, Order number 919, and 11 CIP Reliability Standards are approved at the same time. 11. That is not a patch. That is the deepest rewrite of the CIP family in a decade, and the standards are the smaller half of the story. The words your program is built on changed. Cyber Asset, ESPBES Cyber Asset, 18 definitions revised, 4 brand new ones. And the exception process your legacy equipment has lived under since 2008 is being replaced by 4 words, per system capability. Here's the thing. Most of the summaries circulating right now print the wrong compliance date. Later in this episode, I'll show you the right one, straight from NERC's own standards database. If you run a CIP program, audit one, or architect the systems underneath one, this order is your next 2 years. Let's get into it. Quick disclaimer, the full text is on the screen. I'll pause a few seconds so you can read it. Start with one definition. A cyber asset is a programmable electronic device, hardware, a physical box. The entire CIP framework was written around that idea. You find boxes, you group them into BES cyber systems, you draw an electronic security perimeter around the network they sit on, and you protect what's inside. Then virtualization happened to the rest of the computing world. One physical host running dozens of virtual machines. Networks defined by policy instead of wiring, and the CIP standards had no vocabulary for any of it. Can a hypervisor host a high-impact workload next to anything else? Where is the perimeter when the network is software? There was no clean answer. For years, the safe answer was simply don't virtualize. NERC started fixing this in March 2016, Project 2016-02, 5 ballot rounds over nearly a decade. The final ballot ran in April 2024. NERC filed the petition on July 10, 2024, supplemented it on May 20, 2025. FERC proposed approval that September, and on March 19, 2026, Order 919 landed. So what exactly is in the package? 11 standards, CIP 2-7, CIP 3-10, CIP 4-8, CIP 5-8, CIP 6-7.1, CIP 7-7.1, CIP 8-7.1, CIP 9-7.1, CIP 10-5, CIP 11-4.1, and CIP 13-3. Notice the point ones. NERC's supplemental petition corrected errata in 5 standards, and those 5 carry a decimal version. When these take effect, every currently effective version retires, all the way back to CIP 2-5.1a. Now, watch the boundaries here, because this is where most summaries blur. On the very same day, FERC issued 2 separate concurrent orders, one approving CIP 3-11 for low-impact systems and one approving CIP 2-8 with the revised control center definition. Same date, different orders, and as you'll see, a different compliance year for one of them. And CIP 15, the internal network security monitoring standard from Episode 1, is not touched by any of this. Its own clock runs separately. 4 new defined terms. 2 of them do the everyday work. First, virtual cyber asset, a logical instance of an operating system or firmware currently executing on a virtual machine. 3 exclusions matter. A dormant file-based image is not a VCA because it isn't executing. An instance being actively remediated in an isolated environment is not a VCA yet, and the host underneath is never a VCA. And before you ask, application containers are not VCAs either. They are treated as software of whatever hosts them. Second, cyber system. One or more cyber assets, virtual cyber assets, or shared cyber infrastructure. That little umbrella term quietly replaces cyber asset in definition after definition, and it's how the virtual world gets pulled into scope everywhere at once. Which leaves the big one. Shared cyber infrastructure. That term decides whose hypervisors are now inside the CIP program. Stay with me. Here's the definition that decides budgets. Shared cyber infrastructure, a programmable electronic device including the software that shares its resources that hosts a VCA belonging to a BES cyber system or its associated EACMS or PACS, and at the same time hosts a VCA that is not of the same impact categorization or provides storage resources the same way. Read that again because the trigger is the mix. A hypervisor cluster that hosts only high-impact workloads? Not SCI. Everything on it is inside the high-impact world already. A cluster that hosts your high-impact EMS next to medium-impact systems or next to corporate workloads, that is SCI, and the moment these standards take effect, it carries SIP obligations by name. SCI appears in applicability columns across the package. And one subtlety most teams will miss. The SCI definition excludes the VC as it supports. The host and the guests are different things now, with different treatment. Your asset inventory has to tell them apart, so the infrastructure is in scope. Who can touch its controls? That's the third new term. Management interface, an administrative interface that controls initializing, deploying, or configuring shared cyber infrastructure, or an autonomous subsystem that provides console access independently of the host's CPU, firmware, and operating system. Think lights out management cards, or anything that configures an electronic access point. Why does this get its own defined term? Because it's the keys to the kingdom. Compromise the management plane of a hypervisor and you own every workload on it without ever touching the workloads themselves. The new standards manage the accessibility and attack surface of exactly that plane. And notice what got revised to match. Interactive remote access now explicitly includes access to a management interface. The remote access rules you apply to BES cyber systems follow the administrator all the way into the virtualization console. Now the revised definitions and the one everyone will quote. The electronic security perimeter. Everyone reads ESP as the logical border around a network, but the revised definition has a second prong. An ESP can also be a logical boundary defined by one or more electronic access points. No enclosed network required. That second prong is the door to zero-trust architectures, and NERC says the quiet part out loud. Entities may adopt early specifically to leverage zero-trust. The electronic access point itself becomes an electronic policy enforcement point. Policy, not just a firewall interface. Cyber Asset now explicitly excludes SCI. BES Cyber Asset now reads Cyber Asset or Virtual Cyber Asset with the 15-minute impact test unchanged. Protected Cyber Asset picks up a prong that should change your architecture reviews. AVCA that shares CPU or memory with any part of a BES cyber system becomes a PCA. Affinity rules just became compliance controls, and where auditors will actually focus, the incident definitions. A cybersecurity incident now includes attempts to compromise SCI, and a reportable cybersecurity incident includes compromise of SCI supporting a BES cyber system. Your hypervisor just entered your incident response plan with a reporting clock attached. Two standards carry most of the architecture. CIP 5-8 keeps its title, Electronic Security Perimeters, but the purpose line resets the philosophy. Protect BES cyber systems by permitting only known and controlled communication. Requirement R1 still wants routable protocol systems protected by an ESP, and Part 1.2 wants only needed communications permitted, documented, with everything else denied. Backwards compatible with your firewalls. Forward compatible with policy enforcement. CIP 10-5 is the bigger workflow change. Everyone reads CIP 10 as the baseline standard. 5 configuration items track them all. But the requirement now says something different. Authorize changes that alter the behavior of one or more cybersecurity controls serving CIP 5 or CIP 7 as defined by you, the responsible entity. The baseline list is gone as the organizing idea. NERC calls this broadening change management beyond a baseline-only approach, built for environments where machines are created and destroyed by automation. That's the carrot. Now the stick that FERC almost didn't allow through. Since 2008 and Order Number 706, if a device physically could not meet a CIP requirement, you filed a technical feasibility exception, an application to the ERO, compensating measures achieving a comparable level of security, approval, reapproval when assets changed, a program with 15 years of paperwork behind it. Order 919 approves its replacement. The phrase, where technically feasible, appears in 9 requirements of the current standards. All 9 become per system capability, and the phrase gets added to 6 more requirements that never had exception language at all. What does it mean? If you can demonstrate the system is incapable of performing the required action, say a firmware-based black box device, you document that limit, implement your own equally effective alternative mitigation, and prove it during compliance monitoring. No application, no approval queue. NERC insists this does not act like an exception because the security objective still binds you. FERC saw it differently, a self-implementing exception with marginal oversight. So FERC said yes and attached strings. 3 directives ride along with the approval. First, NERC must publish a clear set of criteria when you can invoke per system capability, what you document, and what alternative mitigation has to look like. Consistent across entities, consistent across the regions auditing them. Second, mandatory reporting. If you invoke the language, you report it to the ERO enterprise through the align tool or whatever mechanism NERC builds. Basic facts. Which requirement, why, what mitigation. Third, NERC files an annual report with FERC. Anonymized, aggregated. How many entities, how many exceptions, against which requirements, with what mitigation, nationally and by region. First one due 12 months after compliance becomes mandatory, and the deadline that matters now. FERC directed that the program be ready before the first early adopters can comply early, which raises the question, when is that? The order took effect May 26, 2026, 16 days before this video. The implementation plan says the standards become effective the first day of the first calendar quarter 24 months later. Now, several early summaries did that math and printed April 1st, 2028. Check NERC's own standards database today. Every one of the 11 standards says, subject to future enforcement. July 1st, 2028. May 26th plus 24 months is May 26th, 2028. The next quarter starts July 1st. That's your date. Write it down from the source, not from a newsletter. Early adoption is real, and it's 3 fixed exits. January 1st, 2027. July 1st, 2027. January 1st, 2028. Pick one. Tell your regional entity within 15 calendar days, and the new standards apply to you early, in full. Until then, the current standards keep applying, and the neighbors. CIP 2-8 lands the same day, July 1st, 2028. CIP 3-11 gets an extra year, July 1st, 2029. CIP 15's clock points at October 1st, 2028. 4 different programs, 3 different years. Map them on one calendar before someone in your shop assumes they move together. 25 months sounds like a long runway. It is not. Here's the punch list. 1. Inventory reality. If there's a hypervisor anywhere near your OT estate, find out today whether it hosts mixed impact workloads. That single fact decides whether you'll own SCI in 2028. 2. Run the definition diff. 18 revised terms touch your CIP policies, your network diagrams, your incident response plan, and your training material. The documents won't rewrite themselves, and FERC's own burden estimate for that documentation work is real money. Roughly 58 hours per standard, across an estimated 400 entities per standard. 3. List your TFEs. Every one of them converts to a per-system capability demonstration. Decide what your documented limit and alternative mitigation will say when the auditor asks. 4. Watch for NERC's per-system capability program filing. It has to exist before January 1st, 2027. 5. Only then decide on early adoption. If Zero Trust or virtualized EMS is on your architecture roadmap, an early exit might genuinely pay. The whole story, fast. One order, March 19th, 2026, 11 CIP standards, 4 new terms. Virtual cyber asset, shared cyber infrastructure, management interface, cyber system. 18 revised ones, including an ESP that no longer needs a network border. Mixed impact hosting is the SCI trigger. Baselines give way to security control behavior in CIP 10-5. The TFE program ends. Per system capability begins with 3 FERC-directed strings attached. Mandatory compliance July 1st, 2028, not April. Early exits January 1st, 2027, July 1st, 2027, January 1st, 2028. The standards finally speak the language your infrastructure has spoken for 15 years. Make sure your program documents speak it too before July 2028. If this helped, subscribe. Episode follow-ups land as the Per System Capability Program and the CIP 3-11 clock develop. Stay compliant.